Hey everyone, I wanted to do a quick refresher on our ground plan view and the standards that we'll see in it. I think most of you got this in the last couple of assignments, but I have access to the book again and I have downloaded a PDF so that you have not only the library link reference, but also the PDF of this section of the textbook because it is actually really helpful. So, a few things, right? So, here is sort of their explanation about what the design package is. Cool, cool, cool. And then we scroll down and we see ground plan standards. And this is the kind of stuff that we're going to start implementing in our drawings, okay? So, I tend to do this drawing style, right, where I have the double lines for flats, and I would encourage you to do that as well. I think it's clearer, especially now that most flats are hard-covered Hollywood flats. They're not those thin single-line soft-covered flats anymore. So that is something that I tend to do. And then here is their sort of explanations of other line styles that you might encounter in a ground plan and other labeling standards, right? So these are all USITT standards. You can do this game where you do the cross and then you inset above that the height measurement, which can be either in a circle or not, but which is always listed in inches. So that is an option on platforms. I, at this point, don't typically put an X on a platform anyway. I feel like it's less clear, but that is something that you have the option of doing to indicate that a surface is a raised platform. For stairs, you can, and there are a couple of different options here, right? There are regular tread height staircases where your steps are all the same height. And in those cases, you just mark the height of the lowest step and the highest step, and you use an arrow to connect those across that gap. And then we know to assume that it's the same spacing for each stair, right? If you have randomly different height treads, also known as an actor trap, designed in your set, then you would want to indicate those individual step heights separately. If you're using a ramp, then you would indicate using a line the direction of that rake and the low point and high point of that rake. So that could be either a straight ramp like this example, or it could be going on a diagonal, in which case you would move your line to align with the angle of the slant. Drapes. Okay, so if you are using curtains, you typically want to use the wavy line to indicate that it is a curtain. You can mark curtains that have no fullness as a straight line or a dashed line if it's a border, right? So a border is above the stage height. But often a squiggly line will be used when you're talking about curtains, okay? And then there are also drops that touch the floor. Those are just a straight line, or drops that are overhead or painted borders. Those would be a dashed line. And then travelers are shown typically open with the fullness, right? So that is the way that a traveler would be indicated on a ground plan. We won't be having any travelers in our project, but we will be using drapes. And so you will be using that squiggle line. So this is a useful reference. I can also upload the USITT reference plate, which has everything that USITT recommends as standards. But again, I don't always use just those, right? And that's something that this designer in the book also talks about, right? Like he shows other ways that he will indicate various types of scenery. He also talks about various ways of dimensioning ground plans, and in our case, we will not need to include dimensions on our ground plan. While that is an option, typically in drafting that I see, I don't see ground plans dimensioned because those drawings are always or nearly always replicated in CAD, and so whoever the technical director has the digital drawing, and they can pull those measurements as they need them. There are a couple of different ways that those dimensions can be provided if they are needed by, for example, a stage manager to help tape out the set, that kind of thing. You can provide those in that way. And this is like the coordinates way, right? Where it's distance to the center line and distance to the plaster line are listed at the points where those intersections fall. So that is also an option if you wanted to do that for your stage manager, or if you wanted to provide something like a focus tape, right? Which is just measurements, providing measurements at center line and plaster line that they can then be used as like a tape measure to determine locations of other objects. There also are the options, right, to include sight lines, which we will not be doing in this drawing, but that is in a proscenium setting, typically included in your ground plan as well. What you are noticing here on this example, right, is you have things like this is a platform, and you can tell because it has that cross going on it, and then it has a little circle with a height number written in it to indicate the height of that level. You are seeing labels on various walls and units, and we will be using the drawing labels that we talked about when we did our scenic drafting package, to indicate plates that we'll be drafting of built scenery later. So you don't need to include those labels at this point, but you will include them in the final drafting package. So you'll want to label the wall, the platform, the stairs, the escape stairs in your final drafting package, as well as the heights of each step. So now let's transition quickly to look at the specific assignment that we're working on today. Okay, so let's look at these various sheets in the handout that I gave you. It's also attached on this assignment. The information, so here's basic idea is I have drafted for you, designed an imaginary set to draft into this very tiny theater, okay? So it includes a platform with 2 steps coming down, and the front edge of that platform is curved. It includes a flat with an arched door opening, okay? And that flat technically has like a little bump out to fit over the platform, and then it'll hit the floor. And then the far left and right edges are masked behind 2 masking curtains. And then there's a black masking curtain that goes all the way to the floor behind this door opening to mask the door to the backstage area, right? Basic concept. Okay. So this whole set will sit into the exit theater that you've drawn already. Here is how it would align, right, within that sheet. And then here is what it would look like in the section view. This is all on sheet 3 of that drafting assignment sheet, okay? So what we are doing is first we are drafting in the ground plan layer. Draft this set as a ground plan layer. Include the platform, wall, masking curtains, okay? Here is a plan view of that scenic unit that you can use as a guide with all of the measurements on it except for one, and that one is the thickness of this wall, which is 3 inches. So that's the only missing dimension. I don't know if you can read that says 3, but it's 3 inches, okay? The rest of those dimensions are given to you. There are a couple of other things that are a little bit confusing. One of them is this line right here. Doesn't exist, so don't draw it. It is a lighting pipe that we are going to skip. The platform shape itself is here, okay? There it is. Platform unit shape, right? We have the tallest step of that platform is right here, okay? And that is at 2 feet or 24 inches. And you would want to label it as such, right? Each of these steps is then 8 and 16 inches respectively. And you'll see those dimensions are given here on this version of your plan view on your next plate, okay? This is basically what it should look like in plan view, okay? It should have those heights labeled on it. You can either put that in a circle or not, depending on how much space you have. And it should have all of the given elements drawn, right? So it'll have this stuff plus curtains on either side and a curtain behind it, as is drawn in the tiny version, okay? Other things that are incorrect that you would want to change from this sketch drafting I've given you, these lines that you see I've drawn a little X on them, they would not exist. And then this opening for this archway would have dashed lines as indicated, okay? So those are two things that would remain, that would be different from the drawing that I've given you in your final drawing. Then we can talk a little bit about the section and how you would produce it. Again, very much the same way, where you align the two drawings that you have, and then you trace or pull down those lines from that other drawing, okay? So that is how you would find this cut through view. Again, we are cutting through the center line, and the center line of the scenery is aligned with the center line of the stage. So you're looking through the side of the archway, you'll see the opening of the door, and then you'll see this very small top portion with solid lines with diagonal lines for the thickness of that wall. You'll also see drawn here, the curtains have some like fullness, so they're drawn sort of out. You don't need to do that. You can just draw those curtains as a line. If you wanted to put a little circle at the top of it to indicate a pipe, go for it. Be my guest. But your curtains can just be drawn as a line in this case. And heights are given over here, right? So whatever information you need about the height, you should be able to find on this piece over here, okay? Let me know if any of this is confusing or doesn't make sense, or if you need help deciphering it, and I will be happy to go through any of these individual elements with you, okay? So that is the drafting assignment for this week, to add the scenery into the ground plan and into the section view for the exit theater, and then submit those 2 plates by Friday. All right, thanks, friends.